On this episode of Insight, jealousy and envy. How do we manage the emotions?
He couldn't control her anymore, so he killed her.
You've admitted to being jealous in past relationships.
I was always afraid that if they got a taste of life without me, that they would realise that they didn't really need me.
You decided to open up your relationship.
We were very drawn towards the excitement and the connection aspect of non-monogamy.
Some are envious. Women in particular, they come up to me and they sort of whisper to me, I didn't think I'd like you.
The ones that are jealous, those people aren't in a good space in their life.
Kyla, you're a self-made businesswoman. What do you do?
I have the very unusual but very pleasurable job of being an ambassador and an educator specialising in champagne. So drinking champagne for a living. 2 businesses. I'm probably better known by my moniker as a champagne dame. So educating, teaching people about champagne, taking people to Paris and out to the Champagne region. And also I have a business importing champagne, retail distribution, a life centred around the good stuff, the bubbly stuff.
That sounds amazing. How did you get that job?
Well, there really weren't any jobs in champagne when I started. So 20 years this year is my celebration, and started my life in banking and finance. But in 2005, read an article on Napoleon Bonaparte and his love affair with champagne, and decided I would read every book there was to read on champagne. And when I ran out of books, I wrote a letter to a man who'd written my favourite book, and he said, get on a plane, come to Paris, come out to Champagne and I'll teach you everything I know. So I bought a one-way ticket to Paris. I went out, I met with this man, and I started again. So crazy life. I divided my life between Paris and Champagne and a little bit of time in the French Riviera, and had a very colourful life.
How do others react to what you do?
It's a mix, you know, and I think like anything, the closer people are to you, I think there's a respect and not so much an envy, but an admiration. And I think those of you who are a little further away, who see this, or who see social media, or who see you on TV, or in Monaco, or in Paris, I think there tends to be more a jealousy or more of an envy. Women come up and they go, you're genius, you know, you get to legitimately drink champagne from 9 a.m. to 9 a.m. without any repercussions, but some are envious. You know, you'd be amazed at, you know, if I host a champagne masterclass or a champagne dinner, one of the most common things that women in particular say after I finish a presentation is they come up to me and they sort of whisper to me, I didn't think I'd like you, but I do, you know, you're a nice person.
Here's you mixing it up with A-list celebrities. Even Sofia Vergara comes off kind of looking second best there. Do you understand why people...
Oh, we love Matt.
Isn't that amazing? Do you understand why people might envy you?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I have a very unusual lifestyle. You know, living in Paris. One of the first people I met was John Galliano, working for Dom Perignon and being ambassador for some of the biggest champagne brands in the world, and spending a lot of time on super yachts in Monaco and travelling. I can see that, you know, women would be envious of the life that I live.
Grace, you're a musician and an actor. When you were 13, you appeared on The Voice Kids. This is you. Grace, how did you go?
I ended up in the final 2 on Team Delta and the top 6 overall in the competition. So made it all the way to the grand final, and it was probably the most surreal experience of my life. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And you travelled to the US with Delta, I understand, so you're pretty young doing all of that stuff.
Yes, the prize was a trip to LA. And so we got to go to Disneyland, Universal Studios, and Delta also was living in the Hollywood Hills at the time. So my family and I got to spend the day with her playing at her piano, and she had all these croissants, and it was the stuff of dreams, yeah.
That is a lot of success at a young age. Did you feel envied by friends and family?
I think before having that experience, I understood that I could sing, but I didn't think of it to be anything that was greater than someone else's, you know, talent. I think once I was on TV, it felt that the ways that people perceived me, it was almost as if I had to diminish my achievements a lot. And I felt like at school, especially being as young as I was, teachers would often want to talk about it, but students kind of felt as if my success was their loss.
You did well at school. When you left, you studied musical theatre. What was that environment like?
20 students all in pursuit of being a star. I mean, it's a breeding ground for jealousy and envy. I think being in such a close proximity to people and feeling as though the support that I would often give my peers when it came to performances and being the first one to give a standing ovation, I didn't feel like that was necessarily reciprocated to me, because it felt like people thought that they'd make my head explode if they were to give that praise. So I think I often felt like there was a lot of things unsaid or validation that was withheld that I could never understand why.
Do you think there was jealousy towards you?
I think there definitely was, and I think that I knew how people would perceive me in a group environment, which would feel like I would be taking or stealing the attention, when my personality, I think, is just someone who's quite generous and wanting to facilitate a positive vibe for everybody. But to those that were maybe a bit more insecure, would always perceive that as if I was, overshadowing them.
Justin, in your past relationships, you described yourself as being very jealous. What do you put that down to?
Like a lot of people, I grew up in a broken home. My father and mother got divorced. I think that led to that huge feeling of insecurity and a low self-worth, feelings of I'm never going to be good enough. The people that I'm with are just with me for, ulterior motives. And I think that ultimately that insecurity is what leads to pretty intense jealousy.
When you were in a relationship with someone who loved you, how would you feel?
I would never feel what they said about me or how they felt about me was true, because I couldn't see that in myself. And I think my greatest fear was that my partner or anyone around me would see me the way that I saw myself. And that was my greatest fear. And so I was always afraid that if they got a taste of life without me, that they would realise that they didn't really need me.
Angel, you're a clinical psychologist. Can insecurity trigger jealousy?
When we feel insecure, we question our own self-worth, we question our relationships and our abilities, and these feelings can lead us to fear losing something or someone that we hold really dear, and that could certainly lead to feelings of jealousy.
We often say we're jealous when we're perhaps envious. What's the difference between the two?
Jealousy is a very powerful, passionate feeling mixed with anger, anxiety, plus a fear of losing someone or something that we hold dear. Envy, on the other hand, is more of a yearning, a wanting of something that we want to have but we don't currently have. So I might feel jealous when my partner is paying special attention to his coworker, for example, whereas I might be envious of a friend of mine who has a very positive relationship with their parents, which I don't currently have.
Is it common for us to misuse the words envy and jealousy?
I'm not the word or emotion police. Both emotions are very unpleasant to be felt, and they can feel very powerful and passionate. I'd like to think of jealousy as a triangle where there's almost always a third party that's threatening a primary relationship. Whereas envy to me is a bit more like a spotlight or an uplight from the ground to a stage. It's more one-directional and it's more aspirational towards something that we want but we can't have.
Are jealousy and envy negative emotions?
All emotions, jealousy and envy, are just normal human emotions. All of us feel them from time to time. Having said that, I do think that when we act solely out of jealousy and envy, we can act very impulsively. And so behaviours stemming out of jealousy and envy can have a very negative impact on ourselves and other people.
Let's meet Kate. She proudly calls herself the Queen of Jealousy.
In school, I was like a stumpy, nerdy kid. I had a haircut which was sort of like a bowl cut. I would look at the other girls with their incredible long blonde hair, thin and athletic, and I felt like I wanted to be them. As a writer, I used to walk into bookshops and look around and think, what, that fuckwit's written a book? Why haven't I written a book? I'm the queen of jealousy. Yeah, I mean, I love my brother to pieces, but there are days when I'm jealous of him, when I think my parents love him more than they love me. And I felt a weird twinge of jealousy towards my daughter. I remember thinking, here she is in the pool in a bikini, her beautiful long limbs, and I was sucking my stomach in so hard. There is no serum in the world that can give me back that glorious youth. I did have to analyse it for a while before I realised that I was jealous not of my daughter but of the pure possibility that women that age have, and also this bittersweet nostalgia for the woman that I once was. Here he is, I do yearn for my 27-year-old self, that effortless beauty that you have that you don't realise at the time. I would love to have a week back in my old body. I miss having babies. I miss the beautiful, glorious, messy responsibility of all of that, of being madly in love. I look at all these photos and I'm jealous of myself. Next year I'll be 60. I don't care what anyone says. We all think about what we look like as we age. I have been awash with jealousy most of my life, not an attractive quality, but I own it, and it's actually what motivated me to end up writing my book. I do not think people should feel ashamed to feel envy or jealousy. It's just another emotion, and if you keep it inside, it's going to burn you up. Get it out, people.
Sadie, that was your mum, Kate.
It was. How's the boogie boarding? Go, Mum.
Did you know she envied you?
No, definitely not at the time. She hid that rather well. But I think that there's that really interesting distinction between more of a malicious jealousy and then that playful jealousy. So when she told me that she was jealous of me, it was definitely not the malicious kind. It definitely never had a negative impact on me at all.
Do you ever experience jealousy or envy?
I think probably a lot, as a teenager, I went through that. Similar to hearing your story, if there was someone on The Voice, I'd be like, oh, you get to go holiday, that's pretty cool. But I think for the most part, my mum has raised me, both my parents, to not really care about what other people think. So I guess I've always just kind of been who I want to be. But yeah, I guess sort of in that playful tone as well. Like, I'm jealous of my partner's incredible hair and killer dance moves, but I can assure you that's not, with malicious intent.
Is there anyone in your life you feel maybe a twinge of envy towards?
Well, currently my mother is poolside with a mojito in hand. I think that we can all agree that that's something to be envious of. But she's a journalist and a writer, and she writes in just the most beautiful, articulate manner. So I definitely envy that. But yeah, no, she's the best, and she's always taught me to make everything in life hilarious. I'm definitely not envious of her height, though. She's very small. And Carla, I think I'm envious of your job now. So, yes.
Motivator.
Motivator. Again, no malicious intent.
Angel, we've heard there that jealousy can be a motivator. Can it be a positive?
It can often tell us what we're missing or what's important to us or what we hold dear. Noticing feelings of jealousy can help us face our fears, reckon with the things that we haven't done or could be doing to hold the people we love tighter, for example. I also think that feelings of envy can be a massive motivator.
Michelle, when your grandfather died, he owned a number of pubs and hotels. Who did he leave them to?
My grandfather was an Irish publican who came out from Ireland with my grandmother, and he owned a number of Sydney hotels, and he left, in the Irish tradition, 50% of the estate to my uncle and 25% each to my mother and my aunt. My uncle put a proposal to them and bought them out. So his wealth grew considerably. He had a big water frontage in Sydney, a beach house in the Northern Beaches, and then he took the business to Vancouver.
And what happened to your mum and aunt?
My mother was a single mother. She had to work full-time, raising 2 children on her own. We had to make ends meet. We would go to school at 5 years of age by ourselves, come home to an empty home. Mum was always at the office. So, you know, you had to grow up very quickly. So I had a brother, and not having that father figure, I think, had a big impact on David. And sadly, he had a drug overdose when he was 23 and I was 21. So from that point, I kind of became my mother's mother at a very young age, looking after her.
How did that childhood and growing up shape you?
I guess it toughened me from a very young age. I felt that I needed to be successful in my own right. I thought it was important not to be relying on others for your success or your money. And I set a goal and I went for it.
You're now financially comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
How many properties do you own?
I own 5 properties and have an interest in 2, which I'm purchasing next year.
Your 3 children are aged between 20 and 26. Have you and your husband helped them buy properties?
Yes, I put a proposal to my 3 kids that I would match whatever they save for a deposit on a place. I'd prefer them to be in the property market rather than renting. So I gifted them $50,000 each.
Do you think there's sort of envy around that and jealousy that comes out?
People who applaud me for this decision and think it's terrific are generally people who are happy within themselves and where they are in life. The ones that are envious or jealous, I think those people aren't in a good space in their life, and I think are envious that they haven't ended up doing similar things with their money and they've ended up broke or whatever it is. But we all make choices. I've not been jealous that I came from a bit of a battling background. I just admired people who were successful and thought, I want to do that too.
Grace, you're Michelle's daughter. You and your brother have put down a deposit on a $1.8 million apartment. Have you noticed any envy from friends?
Yeah, I have. I tend to not tell people about our purchase because people are quite quick to assume and judge you that our parents just gave us a handout. They don't know how hard we actually worked for the other 50% of the deposit. They don't know the experiences that my mum and parents kind of went through to shape our, I guess, goals on that. So I do sense that people around me are quite jealous and envy of our purchase because we are also quite young. I'm 26, my brother's 23, which is very young to get into the property market.
What were the sacrifices you made to get there?
Well, leaving school, we didn't go on gap years. We went straight to uni. I was working 3 jobs at one time, just always saving, said no to a couple social events with some friends, no to some nice shoes maybe. But yeah, I just always had that goal in front of me to save, yeah.
Renata, you had your own business in Brazil before you moved to Australia 25 years ago. You attended university here. How was your knowledge and experience received?
So I did sell my business in Brazil, moved to Australia when I was 29 with my 2 young boys and my husband. As an international student, I was really surprised by this behavioural quirk in Australia where you shouldn't speak up or be loud or show off. And I come from a very boisterous culture. I'm from Brazil originally, and then I had, people are laughing already. So yes, you watch a Brazilian soccer match, you see how loud we can be. We are flamboyant, and I was also partly raised in the US, you know, in the Silicon Valley of all places, where there is a culture of innovation and being loud and being confident. So those were the educational systems that I had experienced. And then in Australia, I felt like less is more, and I should just meet expectations and never exceed them.
How do you think you were viewed in the workplace?
I had to start working pretty quickly, and that's when it became really evident that I was too much. So I felt like I was too much for the workplace, maybe in the way that I was showing up and the way that I dressed, very colourful. When I moved to Melbourne, of all places, I did not own a single piece of black clothes. My mother still thinks that black is for funerals. So all those differences were things I was not prepared for, even though I felt worldly and experienced, but I felt that those were very Australian behaviours that I had to adjust to.
I mean, you'd been the boss of your own business. You'd marketed your own business. Did you feel like you could let those qualities and skills shine in a workplace, or you had to downplay them?
I had to downplay them. I had to downplay them because I came to Australia and I studied as an undergraduate, so I started from the bottom up. Even though I assumed I would be able to use those skills pretty quickly, I wasn't supposed to. And it was only a few years later, I think it was 2005, when a lovely boss who is British pulled me aside after a few career-limiting moves I had made and explained to me the concept of tall poppy syndrome. So I don't know if people are aware, but tall poppy syndrome is an Australian terminology. But I wasn't aware, and I wasn't aware that there was a definition for something I was feeling and experiencing. And it's not to say that only migrants feel it, no. But because I come from a culture where that doesn't really exist, I could see it more, whereas people that are born and bred in Australia just tend to normalise that type of behaviour and attitude.
You left the corporate world, you're now a career coach. Mm-hmm. What effect does tall poppy syndrome have on people?
Oh, it has a huge effect. I work with professionals that are looking for work, people that are between jobs and have to go through the recruitment process. If you are never happy to put yourself first and to stand out, how are you going to win that competition where you need to be the final candidate to get the job? So storytelling during interviews where you have to put yourself first and talk in the first person and talk about your achievements. If you are living in a culture where being a tall poppy is seen as a negative, you hate that process. You don't want to go through that. It's much more difficult for my Australian clients to go through it than some other clients that I have in different countries.
Liam, you and your wife Abby have been together for 13 years. Why did you decide to become non-monogamous?
Well, when I first met Abby, I was immediately drawn to this kind of sense of adventure and this curiosity and creativity that she had. And when we started dating, we developed this really strong kind of foundational sense of communication. And as part of that communication, we started to chat, what would it look like if we had a relationship that looked a little bit different to the kind of classic script that we're kind of fed, this monogamous script of like you are only with the one person.
Did you talk about how to approach jealousy if it came up?
We did, but I think for Liam and I, we were very drawn towards the excitement and the connection aspect of non-monogamy. When jealousy presented, I feel like it was more something that we should feel. We knew that we might feel it at times, but I mean the narrative around, jealousy and how jealousy would rip a non-monogamous relationship apart was quite prominent, especially when there just aren't many, real lived examples of non-monogamy. So of course, we had concerns because we are deeply connected and in love and, we are committed to each other. So we didn't want to risk our strong foundation of a relationship that we had. But we still felt really positive about non-monogamy being a really exciting thing for us to explore.
You decided to open up your relationship, Abby. How did you do that?
2 years into our relationship, we were living overseas in New York City. We had been discussing non-monogamy for about a year, and we were actually out for dinner one night with a colleague of mine, and we were sharing with her a little bit about how we were thinking about exploring non-monogamy, and unbeknownst to me, she was in the non-monogamous space and was very encouraging with it. And so we actually had a bit of an impromptu night together, but I think that it was such a positive experience because Liam and I had spoken about it so much, and I felt really comfortable with her as well. So all of these fears around, would this be something that might tear us apart? Is this going to be the beginning of the end? It really wasn't like that. It was 3 consensual adults having a really wonderful time together.
Liam, how would you describe your relationship today?
Yeah, so we have a very committed, loving relationship. We're parents to a 7-year-old, and we also have this kind of non-monogamous approach to relating as well. So we have partners that can kind of range from platonic partners that sometimes it becomes there's a physical, intimate component to that, to kind of more partners that are more in the polyamorous space where we can develop kind of, you know, deeper emotions for those partners. But at the core of it, it's a deep care for each other, and all of the non-monogamous experiences that we have kind of happen on top of that.
Where are you both at now in terms of partners outside your marriage?
Yeah, so I'm dating someone for about over a year, so a lover of mine in Canberra, which is where we're from.
And she's become a close friend of mine. And I've been seeing someone who actually lives interstate, and we've been seeing each other for about 5 years now.
Abby, do you feel jealous when Liam is with his lover?
I think it is more like an envy. It's not so much around the intimate nature of their relationship. It's more around something that I'm noticing might be lacking with Liam and I. Like if they're going bouldering together or there's some sort of activity, I'll stop and think, gosh, like we haven't done anything like that for a little while. You know, I'd really like to do that.
You mentioned the term compersion to our producer before this show. What is that?
So compersion is often thought of as actually the opposite of jealousy. Where somebody might normally feel jealous, instead there's a feeling of joy or excitement, like a sympathetic joy for your partner, even if you're not the exact cause of that joy. You know, and I think compersion is a really important aspect for non-monogamous relationships, because if there isn't compersion, perhaps then you're just left to navigate the jealousy, and there might not be much of a point to sort of explore non-monogamy if it's not without the joy. Because, you know, for Liam and I, this started because for me, where somebody might feel jealous, I actually love that he spends time with his partner. It's something that feels really warm for me. So that is compersion.
Liam, what about you? Do you experience compersion, or do you ever get jealous of Abby's other partners?
I definitely experience a lot of compersion, and as Abby said, I think it underpins our non-monogamous experience. So potentially Abby might be going out on a date with a partner, and I'm not jealous of her, but rather I'm envious that maybe I would like to go out on a date as well. So initially, I think there was a lot of confusion. I thought I was feeling jealousy, but actually it was more of an envy.
Kyla, you've been in non-monogamous relationships with other couples. How do you feel about open relationships?
I'm so interested listening to your conversation because I'm grappling with non-monogamy. I have been in non-monogamous relationships, but I don't know whether relationship is the right word. I have, since separating from the father of my child, been seeing multiple men and women at the same time, but in an open forum where I've said that this is not an exclusive relationship. But I have recently been presented with the possibility of going into a relationship, but from the outset being said that this is a non-monogamous relationship.
What do you grapple with?
I think that I would want to go into a relationship, if it is a relationship, with that person, finding the joy, the happiness and the spark with that person, and then maybe once there's trust and there's safety, then you can communicate and say, well, okay, here are the boundaries and maybe we can be with other people. What I'm grappling with at the moment is going into a relationship where that's been put on the table from the beginning, where you know that you're not going to be the only one from the get-go. It's like, well, am I not enough right now? Am I not enough today? Am I never going to be enough? Whereas with you guys, maybe you've gone, okay, they are enough, but let's look at what else there is. And I probably would be more inclined to go that way, and I probably would be the one to open that conversation, to be totally honest. And I'm really probably the most sexually open-minded person, but I'm really grappling with it at the moment. I'm thinking about it, and I love this idea of compersion. I'm listening.
You're bisexual. You have had a 17-year relationship with a woman. Has there been any jealousy there?
Not with her. I think relationships for me are energy, and I think the closest way of describing me, I hate being put in a box. I hate people saying, oh, you're bisexual, and I say, well, actually, I'm connected to someone's energy. So then they're like, oh, so you're pansexual. And I think we really get into more danger when we're trying to put our relationship into a box. So for me, I might have a completely monogamous relationship with a man and not even think about having sex with another woman or anyone else. Whereas her and I have been in a relationship on and off for 17 years, and there's now 3 of us. You know, she has a partner now, so the 3 of us are together. You can call it throuple. We get called lots of things. But again, there is no jealousy whatsoever. Like, zero zilch. He calls us his wives. We call him our hubby. They live together. I'm probably the outsider, but it's love, and it's special, and it's energy.
Abby and Liam, do you ever question whether you're not enough for each other?
No. Here's the short answer.
I was wondering who was going to answer the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. I think, you know, that's a really good point of, you know, having it be from this point of stability. We didn't rush into this, and we also spent a lot of time connecting with each other and building those really strong foundations where we had that time to focus on one another for years. And I mean, everybody's different, but that is what worked really well for us. And then having it be compersion led, I think has made it be a very abundant and positive experience. I don't feel like there's anything wrong with me or lacking in me when Liam is enjoying being with his other partner. She's wonderful. We're separate people. I don't need to compare myself to her. I'm my own person and she's her own person. So I think having that strong foundation is really important for us.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's really important for us to see it as coming from a place of abundance. So if we felt that our relationship, for whatever reason, was becoming rocky, we would choose to probably retreat from being non-monogamous and actually work on our relationship, because it's so important for us that we are caring for each other, and it does come from abundance.
Justin, you've said your insecurity led to jealousy in past relationships. How did that play out for you?
I guess it manifested in a constant need for reassurance, a constant need to be around my partners. It was almost, in a way, I was afraid that the moment was fleeting, that they might someday realise that life would be better without me. And so I held on so tightly to the moment, to that person, in fear that it would one day end. And so that manifested in always wanting to know where they were, who they were with, where they were going. And of course, that is quite a toxic relationship. And I didn't like who I was in that moment either.
We've spoken to one of your former girlfriends. She said she's very proud of you for acknowledging your jealousy. How have you overcome it?
A short-term fix for jealousy is constant reassurance. But the long-term fix, and what took me the longest time, is just to love myself and to learn that you can be okay, you can be loved, you can trust people. And it took a lot of time, obviously, like therapy and things like that, and a lot of self-meditation and thinking through all of these things. And I think the way that that's manifested is that the things that people say about me and the way that they see me is starting to align with the way that I see myself. So I can look in the mirror and see myself the way that other people say they see me.
Grace, your former partner, like you, is in the entertainment industry. Was there any jealousy or envy in that relationship?
Yes, and I think that with other partners I've had also that have been creative or artistic, it's always been the qualities that drew them to me and made our connection feel so incredible in the beginning are the things that I was eventually resented for by my partners, because it felt like we were in competition. My partner would sabotage audition opportunities and would feel as though when, you know, something exciting was happening for me in my career, that somehow that was something that he needed to be insecure of within his own right. And yeah, it was ultimately what led to the end of that relationship.
Angel, can jealousy and envy in relationships cause problems?
Healthy, interesting, emotionally rich relationship can hold a spectrum of emotions, including jealousy and envy. However, when jealousy and envy are the predominant themes in a relationship, that's when it can lead to impulsive behaviors, irrational behaviors, aggression, violence, dishonesty, harm to self and others.
Why is it that jealousy can sort of tip some of us over the edge into more harmful actions?
Jealousy can often tip us over the edge because it is a very complex feeling and powerful feeling mixed with anger, anxiety, fear. So jealousy as an emotion can really trigger that fight or flight response. So that can lead to responses and behaviours that can seem very impulsive or irrational or without forethought. It could look like violence, it could look like self-harm, it could look like addictive behaviours. So a range of very, very harmful behaviours to the self and to the other person.
Julie, you were a police officer working in domestic violence when your sister Anne was murdered.
A man who smothered his wife to death with a pillow at their Milperra home will spend at least 12 years behind bars. Anne Rogers was killed after reconnecting with her high school sweetheart.
The Crown arguing he killed because he was angry and jealous after finding messages sent between his wife and the childhood sweetheart she had reconnected with on Facebook.
Julie, what was your sister Anne like?
She was a beautiful person. She was a great mother, she was a great grandmother. She had lots and lots of friends. And at her funeral, I walked into this church and I have never seen so many people at a funeral. She was well loved.
Anne and her husband had been married for 41 years. Do you believe jealousy was behind her murder?
Absolutely. He was envious that she had reconnected with someone on Facebook and she was having this online relationship, friendship with this person, and he found out and he said to her, I want you to promise on your mother's grave that you'll never contact him ever again, because he did control her and he found out that she did and he couldn't control her anymore. So he killed her.
You worked in DV. What was it like to know that your sister had been involved in a DV relationship?
I could never have predicted that this would happen to my sister, because if I could have predicted it, I would have saved her, and I couldn't even save my own sister.
Kim, you were admitted to a psychiatric unit during a severe depressive episode with bipolar disorder. How did you feel when family and friends visited you?
For the first few weeks, everything was fine. And all of a sudden, around the third week, I started to feel very jealous and envious of everyone, to the point where I didn't want to know what they were getting up to, even as simple as going to work, having dinner with their children, those little things. And sometimes if my cousins were together, they'd be talking with each other and I'd be sitting there.
What were you jealous of?
Their life, and I had no life. I was in hospital and I was to the point where this is going to be the rest of your life, because that's how dark I got. I became also suicidal, and then I started to think, I'm going to cut them out. I'm going to start not having any connection with them anymore, because if I'm going to live like this forever, I don't want to be around them, because it was just too painful for me, because I was in such a horrible, dark place.
Were you surprised by those feelings of jealousy and envy?
Oh, yes, because I'm the total opposite. I'm the happy-go-lucky, I'm usually the loudest one in my family and group, love conversations, full of humour, full of love, especially for my friends' children, and just being around them. I stopped socialising, I stopped doing all those wonderful things that I'd done all my life, and there was this hate, this horrible, horrible feeling.
Where do you think the jealousy and envy came from?
I had no purpose in life. I'd resigned from being a youth worker for 30 years because my mental health started to deteriorate. And then I just started to go dark. I stopped eating, I stopped showering, I stopped socialising, talking to people, avoiding everyone. I was dead inside, so...
How did you begin to get on top of those emotions?
Well, the last time I tried to end my life by suicide, I called a service, and the next day I started therapy. I guess the medication's working, so that's a pretty good thing, but just so grateful that I stayed. I chose life and to continue being with the people that I love. And yeah, the jealousy and all that's gone. Maybe just little things like, oh, you're going away next weekend? Yeah, you bitch.
Jodie, your son Riley was 4 and you were envious of other mums. Why was that?
We had no issues whatsoever having Riley. Within a few months of trying, I fell pregnant, and it was a very, standard pregnancy, no issues. So when we, 2.5 years later, wanted to try again for our second child, again, we fell pregnant very quickly, and so we thought, great, same sort of thing, perfect age gap, it's all going to fall into plan. And then I had my first miscarriage, and that was a pretty traumatic one, but we sort of just said, okay, let's keep trying. We definitely want to, so it happens to a lot of people. So we kept trying, and unfortunately from that first miscarriage, nothing happened for a really long time. We were told there was nothing wrong with us, so we just had to keep trying. But it just didn't happen. I had chemical pregnancies, I had a couple more miscarriages, and I just couldn't keep a baby, basically. It just was never going any further. So I often found myself looking at friends who had kids and all their siblings were playing together, and it was really hard to watch other people not have any... I didn't know anyone that was going through the same sort of thing as me, so it was hard.
Did you feel judged for having these feelings?
Yep.
Right.
And that's the problem, I think. Two things can be true. I was extremely lucky to have my son, and I was so grateful to have him. He was amazing. But when you want to, it's very hard to just let that go, the idea that it might not happen. And most people are very supportive, but I did have one other moment that really I found very odd. I went to the emergency room because I was told to do that if I was getting any spotting during a pregnancy. And I'm sitting there, and the nurse said to me, do you have other children at home? And I said, I've got one boy. And she said, oh, well, you're lucky then. And I said, yeah. And she said, oh, me and my husband have been trying for a couple of years. We can't have any. So, you should be grateful, or you should be lucky or something. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, thanks for that. And it was only when I sort of went home that I actually felt quite angry with that comment, because I was going through such a horrible moment, and she chose that to sort of make me feel guilty because I had something that she didn't have.
Did your son want a sibling?
Yeah, very much. He always wanted one, but it was more evident by the time he sort of got kinder age and to school. There was sort of one incident that really stayed with me, and it was I was actually on the way to a park with my son, and I got a phone call in the car from the doctor saying that the last pregnancy test I had, which is positive, now showed that my hormones were not developing any further. I was going through a miscarriage as I was driving to the park, basically. And we got to the park, and I sort of had to put on this happy face and pretend everything was fine. He wanted me to chase him around the park because he only had me to play with. And we got there, and there were just families and mothers groups everywhere, and there was kids playing with other kids, and I was swinging him on a swing later, and he said to me, oh, Mum, I just feel a bit scared. And I said, why do you feel scared? And he said, well, I don't know anyone here, and I don't have anyone to play with. And I sort of had to have a conversation with him about, you don't need to be scared about that, and, they're just here with friends just today. It's just you and me, but that's okay. And those conversations were really hard.
Yoli, you're an only child. Growing up, did you envy kids with siblings?
Yeah, I really did. I wouldn't say it was jealousy, it was more envy. And probably the biggest thing I was envious of is they had someone else they could blame. So when things go wrong, you've got a sibling, there's only so many times that you can blame your cat, your dog or your teddy bear before your credibility gets a little bit wobbly. I would hear kids out in the street or, in the evening or the afternoon playing with their siblings and having that instant pack, and it was something that I very much wanted to have. It left me feeling like I was a half a page or a paragraph behind when I got into the likes of school, because your siblings or people who have got siblings, they're the first ones who are going to be your best friend or your worst enemy. They're going to be the ones who are going to laugh with you or laugh at you. So there's a lot of social cues that kids with siblings get growing up that I didn't have.
Did your parents want more children?
Yeah, they did. In a very similar situation, my mum suffered 4 rather traumatic miscarriages before she had me. And so I was born in the 70s, so IVF wasn't so much a thing there. I did go to them, I remember I would have been about 6, and said, why don't I have brothers or sisters? And Mum and Dad sat me down and explained everything. And they decided at that point that they were going to investigate the possibility of adopting so that I could have a sibling. They were told they would only be eligible for children who were either had severe disabilities, mental or physical, or were terminally ill. I thought that was the reason for the longest time until only a couple of weeks ago. I was under the impression that that's why Mum and Dad never pursued it. But it turns out, speaking to some friends, that they did actually pursue it. And what ultimately knocked them back was Mum's age. She was 37. And the adoption agency said, no, you're too old.
Do you still envy others who have siblings?
I do in some instances. As a teenager, it was a case of the number of my friends who said, oh, God, I wish I was an only child. And I was going, God, I wish I had brothers and sisters. And then I'd actually see them interacting with their brothers and sisters going, no, I'm quite happy being an only child. But most recently, in the last 10 years, it really came to the forefront. My dad in 2015 passed away rather suddenly. Then in 2022, I lost Mum. She passed away. I did feel very alone and I felt envious. Probably one of the biggest ones was if, you know, when you go to a funeral service, the family is in the front row. Usually it's the immediate family of the deceased. Now, I was it. I was the last. Now, I must state that my friends and my extended family were there for me, absolutely. But I felt very isolated and quite envious of knowing that my cousins and my friends and that, when they had to go through that process, would have somebody else there.
Kyla, you have one sibling, a sister who's 14 months older than you. How's that relationship been over the years?
Good growing up. Yeah, it's good to have a sibling, you know, growing up, someone to play with, as you say. But 14 months is awfully close in age, and when you're same gender, same sex, it's good and bad. You share a lot, but obviously you get into those teenage years and things become somewhat competitive, you know, how you are with the boys or how you are at sport or how you are at school. I was very academic, whereas my sister wasn't. I was dating boys in her year level. I was, you know, spending time with people that she wanted to spend time with, and that friendship that we had as children soon turned to rivalry, which wasn't pretty. And that sort of went on throughout our lives. And I think, you know, the jealousy in any form can be really dangerous. And jealousy, I think, in a relationship, in a loving relationship with your partner is the worst. But sibling rivalry has to be second, because you don't get a choice of walking away. And I actually fell out with my sister 5 years ago. So when I separated from the father of my child, I feel like my sister was happy in my sadness, which is very hurtful. And our annual family Christmas get-together, which is normally a place of joy, ended up in an enormous fight, which just sort of rained down, you know, 20 years of contempt and hate. And that was the last time I've seen my sister. I haven't seen my sister since.
Jodie, you always wanted 2 children. You had your last round of IVF more than 2 years ago. How did that go?
I'm happy to say it ended very well. Yes, we had a daughter in the start of 2024, and yeah, she's very gorgeous.
That's your family. So Riley's now 9 years old?
Yes, Riley's 9, Lola's now 2, so yeah, everything's changed, the weight has gone, and it's just so much more light and happiness, yeah.
Thank you so much, and thank you to you all for being here. That's all we have time for. You can catch up on this episode or any others on SBS On Demand. I'll see you next time.